security. The receptionist's voice cut through the lobby's hush, sharp with disdain. Her finger pointed accusingly at the black woman, whose quiet elegance seemed utterly out of place in her eyes. "Get her out, now. Deliveries are around the back." Before the woman could even respond, two uniformed guards were converging, hands outstretched, ready to remove the perceived problem from the pristine marble floor. The morning sun, sharp and indifferent, sliced through the floor-to-ceiling glass of the Pendleton Corp headquarters. It glinted off the polished marble floors and steel accents, a cold monument to corporate power. Across the bustling street, Eleanor Vance watched the building for a moment, her expression unreadable. As CEO of Vance Tech, a titan in the innovation sector, she was accustomed to such displays. But today felt different. This wasn't just another potential partnership. The Pendleton deal touched something deeper, a quiet promise made long ago to a mentor, Dr. Aris Thorne, a brilliant black man whose potential had been stifled by the very kind of systemic indifference Eleanor suspected still lingered within walls like these. This project focused on revitalizing urban tech deserts was personal. It was about building bridges where others had built walls. Eleanor adjusted the sleeve of her charcoal cashmere sweater. It was a piece of understated luxury, whispering wealth rather than shouting it. No flashy logos, no ostentatious jewelry, just quiet confidence and the unmistakable aura of someone who didn't need external validation. She carried a simple leather portfolio. Inside it, plans that could reshape industries, and perhaps plans for other contingencies too. Stepping out of her subtly powerful sedan, she bypassed the valet, a small test she always employed, and walked towards the main entrance. The lobby was a cavern of echoing footsteps and hushed, important-sounding conversations. She noted the immediate, almost fawning greeting given to a man in a loud pinstripe suit who entered just ahead of her. Then the shift as eyes fell upon her. The curious glances, the subtle appraisals, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Does she belong here? She approached the imposing reception desk behind which sat Tiffany Bell. Tiffany, engrossed in her phone, let Eleanor wait. Finally, with an exaggerated sigh, she looked up, her gaze sweeping over Eleanor's dark skin and simple attire with undisguised disdain. The appraisal was swift, the verdict seemingly absolute. "Good morning, Eleanor," began her voice. Calm, modulated, carrying easily across the marble. "I have a 9 o'clock appointment with Mr. Arthur Pendleton." Tiffany's lips curled into a sneer. She didn't even pretend to check the system. "Deliveries go around the back," she stated, her tone dripping with condescension. Eleanor remained still for a beat. Inside, a familiar old sting, sharp and unwelcome, pricked at her consciousness. She suppressed it, focusing instead on the sheer, calculated ignorance before her. Delivery, she thought, a flicker of dry, internal humor surfacing amidst the irritation. Perhaps a delivery of your termination notice is more like it. Before Eleanor could reiterate her purpose, Tiffany was already signaling sharply to two burly security guards standing nearby. "Escort this woman out. She's obviously lost." From across the lobby near the executive elevators, Stephen Thorne watched the scene unfold. He instantly recognized Eleanor Vance, the enigmatic powerhouse CEO Pendleton Corp, desperately needed for this deal. A fleeting moment of surprise crossed his face, quickly replaced by a calculating glint in his eyes. He saw not an injustice, but an opportunity, an unexpected, potentially useful complication to his own ambitions within the company. He adjusted his tie, smoothed his jacket, and deliberately remained silent, a ghost of a smirk playing on his lips as he turned away. Further back, observing from the mezzanine railing, Simone Dubois felt a familiar knot tighten in her stomach. As one of the few black managers at Pendleton, she knew that look on the receptionist's face. She knew the casual cruelty, the assumption of inferiority. She recognized Eleanor Vance, too, a figure she deeply admired. Rage and helplessness warred within her. She wanted to shout to intervene, but the invisible chains of corporate survival, the fear of losing the position she'd fought so hard for, held her fast. She could only watch her heart pounding with a mixture of fury and shame as the security guards took Eleanor firmly by the arms. Eleanor didn't resist. She held herself tall, her gaze fixed forward, betraying nothing of the storm brewing within. The initial sting of the insult, the echo of past slights, was already crystallizing into something else entirely. A cold, hard resolve. As they guided her towards the revolving doors, pushing her out onto the indifferent city sidewalk, the brief flicker of pain was gone, replaced by the chilling clarity of purpose. Standing momentarily on the pavement, the city noise a dull roar around her, Eleanor took a deep, centering breath. She glanced back at the towering glass facade, at the proud Pendleton Corp logo gleaming in the sun. Then she pulled out her sleek, encrypted smartphone. She pressed a single-speed dial contact, her ever-efficient assistant, Emily. Emily Eleanor's voice was level, unnervingly calm. "Execute Plan B immediately. A pause, and initiate protocol Phoenix." There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then Emily's slightly flustered voice came through. "Protocol. Phoenix, Ms. Vance. Are we expecting actual fire?" A ghost of a smile touched Eleanor's lips, unseen by anyone. Figuratively speaking, Emily, she replied, her voice like velvet over steel. "Prepare for figurative fire." She ended the call, slipping the phone back into her pocket. As Eleanor Vance turned and walked away, melting into the city crowd, her steps were measured, deliberate. Inside the imposing glass tower of Pendleton Corp, the polished marble floors still gleamed under the morning sun. But unseen, unheard, the first hairline cracks were already beginning to form. The figurative fire had been lit. Back behind the gleaming reception desk, blissfully unaware of the storm she had unleashed, Tiffany Bell was preening. She smoothed down the lapels of her slightly too bright blazer, basking in the perceived affirmation of her authority. She dealt with the troublemaker swiftly and efficiently. That's what Pendleton Corp needed, people who knew how to maintain standards. She even recounted the incident, embellished for effect, to a junior colleague who offered a nervous chuckle in return. "Some people just don't know their place," Tiffany whispered conspiratorially, taking a self-satisfied sip of her overpriced latte. The sheer arrogance hung in the air, thick and cloying, a stark contrast to the quiet dignity of the woman she had just ejected. It was almost comical if the underlying prejudice hadn't been so ugly. The universe, it seemed, had a penchant for irony. A short distance away, Stephen Thorne observed Tiffany's performance with masked amusement. Perfect. The situation couldn't have played out better if he'd orchestrated it himself. He approached the desk, his expression carefully neutral. "Good work handling that disruption, Tiffany," he said, his voice smooth, subtly encouraging. "It's crucial we maintain a professional atmosphere. You showed excellent judgment." Tiffany beamed, puffing up under the praise from the executive vice president. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. I just did what needed to be done. Can't have just anyone wandering in." Thorne nodded, giving her shoulder a brief, patronizing pat before walking away. He had deftly reinforced her bias while positioning himself as unaware of the visitor's true identity. A useful pawn easily manipulated. Meanwhile, on the mezzanine, Simone Dubois felt physically ill. Thorne's casual praise of Tiffany's blatant racism sent a fresh wave of frustration washing over her. She glanced at the outdated internal communication system on a nearby terminal. No wonder innovation here travels by horse-drawn carriage, she thought, the wry observation doing little to quell her anger. She considered sending an anonymous tip about Thorne's complicity, knowing he'd recognized Ms. Vance. But the risk, she'd seen others sidelined for less. With a heavy sigh, she typed a carefully worded anonymous alert about the mishandling of a high-profile visitor at reception and sent it into the corporate labyrinth, knowing it would likely vanish without a trace. The figurative fire Eleanor Vance had ignited caught faster than anyone at Pendleton Corp could have imagined. Within the hour, frantic whispers turned into panicked phone calls echoing through the executive suites. Vance Tech hadn't just postponed the meeting. They had formally withdrawn from all negotiations, citing irreconcilable differences in corporate values discovered during preliminary interactions. The multi-billion-dollar partnership Pendleton Corp's lifeline in a turbulent market had vanished. Arthur Pendleton, the aging CEO, felt the blood drain from his face as his senior assistant Nicole Adams delivered the news, her voice trembling slightly. Vance Tech withdrawn, but the meeting wasn't even scheduled until 9. He stammered, confusion warring with rising panic. They cited an incident. This morning, Sir Nicole offered hesitantly. Something at reception. Pendleton's eyes widened, a dawning horror replacing the confusion. He slammed his fist on his mahogany desk. Get me Thorne, get me security logs. Find out what happened down there. Now. The emergency leadership meeting was convened in an atmosphere thick with fear. Executives shifted nervously in their plush leather chairs. Arthur Pendleton stood at the head of the table, his face flushed, his voice tight, with barely suppressed rage. Can anyone, he demanded, his gaze sweeping the room, tell me why Eleanor Vance, the CEO of Vance Tech, was apparently thrown out of our lobby this morning, like common trash? Silence descended. Eyes darted nervously. Stephen Thorne, seated near the end of the table, adopted an expression of mild concern. That's deeply troubling, Arthur, he interjected smoothly. I did see some sort of commotion earlier, but I assumed security had it under control. I had no idea it was Miss Vance. Just then, Nicole Adams hurried back into the room holding a tablet. Sir, she whispered, her face pale. We've confirmed it. Miss Vance arrived for her 9 o'clock appointment. Receptionist Tiffany Bell refused her entry, accused her of being a delivery person, and had security escort her out. A collective gasp went through the room. Pendleton looked as though he might physically explode. Tiffany Bell, he roared the name, echoing off the polished walls. A receptionist destroyed a multi-billion-dollar deal. He didn't wait for an answer. He stormed out of the conference room, his footsteps thundering down the hallway towards the main lobby. The atmosphere in the lobby shifted instantly as Pendleton burst through the doors leading from the executive wing. Employees froze, conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes turned towards the reception desk, where Tiffany Bell, oblivious, was touching up her lipstick. Tiffany Pendleton's voice cracked like a whip. He slammed both hands flat on the marble countertop, making her jump violently. Her smug smile evaporated, replaced by wide-eyed fear. Mr. Pendleton, I don't understand. You don't understand. Pendleton leaned in his voice dangerously low, vibrating with fury. The woman you humiliated, the woman you had thrown out of my building this morning, was Eleanor Vance, CEO of Vance Tech. She held the future of this entire company in her hands, and you told her to use the back door. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Tiffany swayed her face, utterly drained of color. I didn't know, she stammered, tears welling up. Nobody told me. Nobody told you, Pendleton spat back. Is common decency something you need to be told? Is basic competence? You are the face of this company, and you just spat in the face of our most critical potential partner. Tiffany began to sob openly, a messy, gulping sound that offered no defense. Her eyes darted desperately towards Stephen Thorne, who had materialized near a pillar, observing the scene with chilling detachment. She sought help, backup, anything. Thorne met her pleading gaze for a fraction of a second, his expression utterly blank, before turning his head, slightly feigning interest in a nearby abstract sculpture. In that instant, Tiffany understood. She was collateral damage, a pawn discarded. Pendleton took a ragged breath, trying to regain some semblance of control. He turned to the stunned employees watching in silence. "Let this be a lesson to all of you," he announced, his voice shaking. "This company will not tolerate incompetence. It will not tolerate prejudice. The damage done today is catastrophic." He rounded back on the weeping receptionist. "Tiffany Bell, you are fired. Effective immediately. Pack your personal belongings and be out of this building in 30 minutes. Security will escort you." He turned on his heel and stalked back towards the elevators, leaving Tiffany to collapse against the desk, her world shattered. Her former colleagues averted their gaze, melting back into their routines, eager to distance themselves from the epicenter of the disaster. Miles away in her serene, minimalist office overlooking the city, Eleanor Vance received a concise update from Emily. Tiffany Bell fired. Arthur Pendleton furious. Pendleton Corp in chaos. Eleanor listened impassively, her gaze fixed on the skyline. "Good," she said softly. "Phase 1 complete." She paused. Emily instructed the legal team to proceed with the $5 million lawsuit against Ms. Bell personally. Ensure the summons is served promptly. Another pause. And it's time for that lobby security footage to find its way to the right online channels. Anonymously, of course. Let the world see Pendleton Corp's true face. The first visible crack had shattered the marble facade, but Protocol Phoenix was far from over. The real unraveling was about to begin. The lobby security footage, grainy but damningly clear, hit the internet like a digital wildfire. Uploaded anonymously, attributed to a concerned employee, it spread across social media platforms, news aggregators, and tech blogs within hours. Tiffany Bell's sneering dismissal of Eleanor Vance, the guard's rough handling Stephen Thorne's knowing smirk in the background. It was all there, raw and undeniable. The public backlash was immediate and ferocious. Pendleton's shame trended globally. News outlets picked up the story, contrasting the footage with VanceTech's terse statement about irreconcilable differences in corporate values. The narrative was clear. Pendleton Corp wasn't just incompetent. It harbored a culture of arrogance and prejudice. For Pendleton Corp, the fallout was catastrophic. The stock, already reeling from VanceTech's withdrawal, nosedived into oblivion. Investors scrambled to dump their shares, horrified by the reputational damage. Emergency calls flooded the switchboards, not just from angry shareholders but from major clients, demanding explanations, threatening contract terminations. The gleaming marble fortress was besieged, and for Tiffany Bell, the world simply collapsed. The $5 million lawsuit summons arrived via a stern-faced courier, the stark legal language leaving no room for misinterpretation. Defamation, racial discrimination, the numbers swam before her eyes, impossibly large. Simultaneously, the viral video made her instantly unemployable. Recruiters who had previously seemed interested suddenly went cold. Her name, now infamous, triggered immediate rejection. Friends stopped returning calls, embarrassed or afraid to be associated with her. Her landlord served an eviction notice, citing complaints from other tenants. Alone in her rapidly emptying apartment, surrounded by packing boxes she couldn't afford to move, Tiffany finally understood the true meaning of rock bottom. The latte-sipping confidence was a distant, mocking memory, replaced by gnawing fear and the crushing weight of her actions. While the public storm raged around Tiffany's actions, a quieter, potentially more devastating storm was brewing within Pendleton Corp's secure servers. Simone Dubois' earlier, seemingly ignored anonymous alert about the mishandling hadn't entirely vanished. It had triggered a low-level flag in an internal security audit protocol, a protocol subtly enhanced by VanceTech's cybersecurity team during their initial due diligence phase weeks earlier, a standard trust but verify measure Eleanor Vance insisted upon. Combined with unusual outgoing traffic patterns from an executive account, the system alerted the internal security chief, bypassing the normal chain of command due to the sensitive nature and directing the findings straight to the chairwoman of the board, Catherine Albright. Catherine, a woman whose calm demeanor hid a spine of forged steel, reviewed the flagged data with growing alarm. It wasn't just internal memos. It was encrypted communication routed through personal channels between Stephen Thorne and William Keller, the CEO of their chief competitor, Keller Dynamics. Using advanced decryption tools, the security team laid bare the damning truth. Thorne had been systematically leaking Pendleton Corp's proprietary research client lists, strategic plans and negotiation tactics to Keller for months, likely in exchange for a promised future position and hefty compensation package. Catherine Albright acted with swift precision. She summoned Arthur Pendleton to her private office, a summons not a request. She laid out the printouts of the emails, her face grim. Pendleton stared at them, his earlier rage giving way to disbelief and a sickening sense of betrayal. Stephen, no. It can't be. It is Arthur, Catherine stated, her voice devoid of emotion. He's been selling us out from the inside. While you were dealing with the public fallout from the lobby incident, this was happening right under your nose. Just then, Stephen Thorne himself was ushered into the office, clearly summoned under a different pretext. He entered with his usual air of composed confidence, which faltered slightly upon seeing Pendleton's devastated expression and Catherine's icy demeanor. Catherine Arthur Thorne began attempting a congenial tone. "Is everything all right?" Catherine gestured towards the emails spread across her desk. "Perhaps you can explain these, Stephen. Your casual exchanges with William Keller." Thorne's face paled momentarily, but the practiced mask of corporate maneuvering snapped back into place. He even managed a small dismissive chuckle, though it sounded forced. Those, he waved a hand vaguely. "Just industry chatter, Catherine. Keeping lines of communication open. You know how it is. Nothing substantive." His attempt at nonchalance was almost pitifully absurd. Catherine leaned forward, her eyes drilling into him. "Nothing substantive," she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "Selling our entire AI development roadmap, leaking the confidential terms of the VanceTech negotiation before it even fell apart. Giving Keller our Q4 marketing strategy. You call that chatter?" "Stephen," Thorne shifted his weight, his composure finally cracking. "Now, Catherine, let's not jump to conclusions." He stammered, his gaze flicking nervously between her and Pendleton. "Context is everything. Perhaps my assistant misfiled some emails, or maybe the server logs are misinterpreted." The excuses sounded weak even to his own ears, a pathetic scramble for denial against irrefutable proof. Catherine Albright cut him off, her voice sharp as glass. "Enough, Stephen. Your betrayal runs deeper than anyone imagined. The board has been alerted. You are suspended effective immediately pending a full internal and external investigation. Security will escort you from the premises. And rest assured the FBI and the SEC will be receiving copies of these casual exchanges this afternoon." Thorne looked utterly stunned, the color draining completely from his face. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, speechless. The game was over. Catherine then turned her steely gaze upon Arthur Pendleton. "Arthur," she said, the ice in her voice thawing, slightly replaced by a weary disappointment. "This rot. It festered under your leadership. The arrogance at the front desk, the treachery in the executive suite. It speaks to a profound failure of oversight and culture. The board convenes tomorrow morning. We will discuss the inevitable bankruptcy filing and your resignation." Pendleton didn't argue. He simply nodded, the fight gone out of him, replaced by the crushing weight of failure. He had been so focused on deals and numbers that he'd ignored the decaying soul of his own company. News of Thorne's suspension and the impending investigation spread like wildfire within the already panicked company. Major clients, spooked by the initial scandal, and now terrified by the prospect of industrial espionage, invoked termination clauses. The exodus was swift and brutal. The following morning, the board meeting was a somber formality. Bankruptcy was declared. Arthur Pendleton tendered his resignation, effective immediately, leaving behind a legacy not of corporate success, but of catastrophic failure. That same afternoon, stern-faced agents from the FBI and the Securities and Exchange Commission arrived simultaneously at Stephen Thorne's luxurious suburban home and his now former office at Pendleton Corp, armed with warrants. The unraveling web had ensnared its architect. Across town, William Keller issued a curt press release from Keller Dynamics expressing shock at the allegations against Mr. Thorne and stating their full cooperation with authorities effectively cutting Thorne loose. The once mighty Pendleton Corp, undone first by prejudice and then by treachery, was officially breathing its last. The marble halls stood silent, waiting for the liquidators. The fall of Pendleton Corp sent shockwaves, but the individual reckonings were only just beginning, unfolding under the harsh glare of public scrutiny and the cold mechanisms of justice. For Arthur Pendleton, the disgraced former CEO, the exit was brutal. Forced out by the board, his name dragged through the mud in every financial publication, he became persona non grata in the circles he once dominated. Invitations dried up. Calls went unreturned. He attempted to leverage his decades of experience into consulting roles only to be met with polite but firm rejections. The stench of failure of a culture allowed to curdle into prejudice and decay under his watch clung to him like a shroud. His vast fortune dwindled under the weight of lawsuits from shareholders and former employees. Eventually, he sold his sprawling mansion, retreating to a modest, isolated cabin in the remote mountains. His days marked by the rhythmic tick of a grandfather clock and the bitter taste of regret. The stress manifested physically, his health declining, leaving him a stooped figure, staring out at lonely peaks, haunted by the ghost of a legacy utterly ruined. There was no quiet retirement, only the drawn-out silence of profound failure. Stephen Thorne's downfall was swifter, sharper, colder. The FBI and SEC investigation was relentless, uncovering years of meticulously planned corporate espionage. William Keller, CEO of Keller Dynamics, cooperated fully, painting Thorne as a rogue actor, sacrificing him to protect his own company. Thorne's attempts to deflect blame or negotiate a deal were futile against the mountain of digital evidence. His high-priced lawyers could do little. The trial was a media spectacle, laying bare his greed and treachery. He was found guilty on multiple counts of industrial espionage and financial fraud, sentenced to a lengthy term in federal prison. His assets were frozen, his family, if he had one close enough to care, distanced themselves. He entered the harsh, unforgiving world, behind bars, stripped of his bespoke suits. His manipulative charm, useless, just another inmate, swallowed by the system he thought he could outsmart. His name became a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms, a reminder of ambition untethered from integrity. While the architects of Pendleton Corp's ruin faced their bleak futures, Tiffany Bell was navigating her own personal abyss. Jobless, infamous, and facing a staggering $5 million lawsuit from Eleanor Vance, she burned through her meager savings within weeks. Evicted from her apartment, she found herself shuffling between temporary shelters and the strained hospitality of distant acquaintances who quickly tired of her presence. She sold her designer clothes, her car, anything of value, but the debt loomed impossibly large. Each online job application met with silence or instant rejection. The viral video of her actions was a digital brand she couldn't escape. Desperation gnawed at her, a raw, unfamiliar fear replacing the arrogance that had once defined her. It was in a crowded, anonymous homeless shelter, clutching her few remaining belongings, that she received the call from Eleanor Vance's attorney. Her heart leaped into her throat, expecting news of asset seizure or further legal action. Instead, the lawyer's voice was coolly professional. "Miss Bell, I'm calling on behalf of Miss Vance. She is prepared to offer a stay on the $5 million judgment." Tiffany could barely breathe. "A stay?" "Yes," the lawyer continued. "On the condition that you complete 2 years of full-time unpaid community service at the Inner City Refugee Support Center. You will report to their director, Ms. Hernandez, starting Monday. Should you fail to complete the service satisfactorily or leave before the term is up, the full judgment will be pursued immediately with interest. Do you accept these terms?" Tiffany didn't hesitate, though no flicker of gratitude warmed her fear. It wasn't mercy. It was a lifeline thrown into the abyss, a choice between crushing debt and grueling service. "Yes," she choked out. "I accept." Her first days at the Refugee Support Center were a brutal awakening. The work was demanding, sorting donations, assisting with paperwork for families, fleeing unimaginable hardship, cleaning common areas. Ms. Hernandez, the center's director, was stern, watchful, offering no special treatment. The refugees, weary and wary, often looked through her, their eyes reflecting hardships she couldn't begin to comprehend. Some, recognizing her face from the news reports shared within their community, treated her with thinly veiled hostility. She faced suspicion, impatience, and the constant draining reality of lives shattered by forces far beyond petty corporate squabbles. Initially, Tiffany worked mechanically, resentment simmering beneath the surface. This wasn't her. Why should she be doing this? But day after grueling day, listening to fragments of stories, seeing the quiet resilience of people who had lost everything, witnessing the casual discrimination they still faced, something began to shift almost imperceptibly. It wasn't an epiphany, but a slow, uncomfortable erosion of her former worldview, chipped away by the stark reality confronting her. It was the beginning of a long, arduous journey, undertaken not out of sudden enlightenment, but out of sheer necessity, the first painful step on a path she was forced to walk. In stark contrast, Simone Dubois walked through the sleek, light-filled lobby of Vance Tech, feeling a mixture of awe and nervous anticipation. The atmosphere was vibrant, collaborative, charged with energy, a world away from the stifling, backbiting culture of Pendleton Corp. Eleanor Vance greeted her personally, not in a grand office, but in a shared innovation hub, surrounded by engineers sketching ideas on glass walls. "Simone, welcome," Eleanor said, her smile genuine, her eyes conveying respect. "We're thrilled to have you. I've reviewed your preliminary work on predictive AI security analysis. It's brilliant. I want you leading our new Project Chimera initiative. It's ambitious, potentially game-changing, and frankly, it needs your mind." Simone was momentarily speechless, the weight of the opportunity, the trust placed in her almost overwhelming. The imposter syndrome she'd battled for years whispered doubts, but Eleanor's confidence was infectious. "Thank you, Miss Vance," she managed, finding her voice. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Eleanor replied simply. Later that week, after successfully navigating a complex technical challenge with her new team, Simone found herself chatting with Emily, Eleanor's assistant, by the artisanal coffee machine. "You know," Simone said, with a wry smile, shaking her head slightly, "the biggest culture shock here isn't the quantum computing cluster downstairs, it's people actually listening to good ideas. Emily laughed. Consider it standard operating procedure, Simone, she quipped back. Takes some getting used to, I hear, especially after, well, anywhere else. Simone took a sip of her coffee, a genuine sense of hope, sharp and clear, warming her for the first time in years. While Tiffany Bell scrubbed floors and faced the ghosts of her prejudice in a downtown support center, while Arthur Pendleton stared at empty mountains, and Stephen Thorne counted days in a concrete cell. Simone Dubois was finally in a place where her talent wasn't just recognized, it was celebrated. The paths had diverged sharply. One led towards a harsh reckoning, another towards a difficult, uncertain redemption, and a third finally towards a future built on merit and respect. The years following the collapse of Pendleton Corp saw VanceTech solidify its position as an industry leader, not just in innovation, but in ethical practice. Project Chimera, under Simone Dubois' brilliant guidance, became a resounding success, revolutionizing cybersecurity and earning accolades worldwide. Simone herself blossomed into a respected visionary leader, proving that talent, when nurtured in a supportive environment, knows no bounds. But Eleanor Vance had one more audacious move planned, born from the ashes of the company that had inadvertently set her on this path. One afternoon, she summoned Simone to a site visit. It wasn't a new campus or a research facility. It was the dark, empty shell of the former Pendleton Corp headquarters, recently acquired by a VanceTech subsidiary in a quiet auction. It's structurally sound, Eleanor commented, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous, dusty lobby where she had once been so rudely dismissed. Just needs a soul. She unrolled a set of blueprints across a makeshift table. The title read, Vance Center for Innovation. Simone stared speechless for a moment, then looked at Eleanor, understanding dawning in her eyes. You're repurposing it. Reclaiming it, Eleanor corrected gently. This building stood as a symbol of exclusion, of potential wasted. We're going to transform it into the opposite. A non-profit hub dedicated to fostering tech talent in underserved communities, promoting ethical AI development, and providing resources for minority entrepreneurs. During the ambitious renovation process, remnants of the old Pendleton bureaucracy occasionally surfaced, providing moments of wry amusement. Look at this, Simone chuckled one day, holding up an incredibly convoluted multi-page paper form required for booking a meeting room in 1998, found stuffed in a forgotten filing cabinet. You practically needed a congressional hearing to reserve a whiteboard. No wonder nothing got done. Eleanor smiled. Consider updating that process. Priority number 1, Miss Dubois. Eleanor's vision was clear. Simone Dubois would lead this transformation. I want you to be its CEO. Simone and Eleanor stated, her trust absolute. No one understands better what this center needs to be what it needs to overcome. The launch of the Vance Center for Innovation was a landmark event. Light streamed through the repurposed glass walls, illuminating spaces now filled with eager students, aspiring entrepreneurs, and community leaders. The cold marble had been warmed by vibrant art and collaborative energy. Standing on the podium beside Eleanor, Simone addressed the cheering crowd, her voice ringing with passion. This place was once a symbol of barriers, she declared. Today it becomes a gateway, a place where talent, regardless of background, race, or zip code, finds opportunity, where innovation serves humanity, where the future is built by all of us together. Elsewhere in the city, nearly 2 years into her community service, Tiffany Bell worked diligently at the Refugee Support Center. The change wasn't dramatic or sudden, but a slow, cumulative transformation forged in the crucible of daily interaction with human struggle. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet humility. The defensiveness had softened into a hesitant empathy. She was often tasked with helping newcomers navigate the bewildering maze of city bureaucracy, a skill she'd ironically possessed, but previously misused in her former life. One afternoon, she patiently guided a frightened young man recently arrived with little English through a complex housing application, calmly deflecting the impatience of a harried city clerk. She used simple language, drew diagrams, stayed long after her shift ended, to ensure he understood. It wasn't for praise. Ms. Hernandez rarely offered it directly. It was because Tiffany now recognized the look of dismissal in the clerk's eyes, the same look she herself had once given so freely, and felt a genuine pang to counteract it. She couldn't undo her past, couldn't reclaim her lost career or reputation. The $5 million judgment, still technically hung over her, stayed, but not forgotten. But here, in this small, often thankless role, she was slowly, painstakingly rebuilding a different kind of value within herself. The journey wasn't over, perhaps never would be, but she was finally facing forward. Brief news updates occasionally surfaced about the men whose actions had precipitated these changes. Stephen Thorne released early for good behavior, but permanently barred from the financial industry, lived an anonymous, isolated existence, the shadows of prison clinging to him. Arthur Pendleton remained in his mountain seclusion, his name a footnote in business history books, a lesson in failed leadership. Their stories served as quiet, grim counterpoints to the vibrant energy emanating from the Vance Center. One clear evening, Eleanor and Simone stood on the rooftop terrace of the Vance Center, the city lights sprawling below them. Young innovators bustled in the labs visible through the windows. It's hard to believe what this place used to be, Simone mused, looking out at the horizon. The past informs us, Simone, but it doesn't have to define us, Eleanor replied thoughtfully. What matters is what we build next. She surveyed the thriving center below. I once thought power was about control, about winning that day. The incident here, it clarified things. True power isn't about destroying, it's about building. It's about turning injustice not into vengeance but into fuel for creating something better, something lasting. Simone nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. A legacy not of anger, but of opportunity. Exactly. Eleanor smiled, a sense of quiet peace settling over her. Below them, the Vance Center for Innovation glowed a beacon against the night sky. It stood not just on the foundations of a failed corporation, but on the principle that prejudice could be dismantled, that talent deserved recognition, and that even the deepest wounds could pave the way for a more just and hopeful future. The story wasn't just about a company destroyed. It was about a better world being built. What a journey, from a moment of painful humiliation in a cold lobby to overlooking the city from a vibrant center built on hope and opportunity. It truly makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much potential goes unseen, silenced by prejudice, and what does it truly take to transform deep wounds, not just into strength, but into a force that reshapes the world for the better. Perhaps we all recognize echoes of these struggles, the fight for recognition, the weight of past mistakes, and the quiet power of choosing integrity even when it's difficult. In the world around us, maybe even in our own lives. This story certainly left us reflecting on the different paths these characters took and the futures they ultimately forged. We'd love to know what resonated most deeply with you. Was it Eleanor Vance's strategic decision to rebuild rather than just destroy? Was it Simone Dubois finding her voice and power? Or perhaps Tiffany Bell's difficult ongoing journey towards making amends? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We also truly value your insights on how we can make these stories even better. If you have ideas about the plot, character, development, or the way the story was told today that you'd like to share, please let us know. Your constructive feedback is incredibly important and helps us grow and improve with every story we create. If Eleanor's strength or Simone's rise inspired you today, please show your support by hitting the like button. And if you feel this story's message about overcoming injustice and the possibility of change might resonate with someone you know, please consider sharing it. For more stories that explore complex choices, consequences, and journeys towards hope, don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you won't miss our next meaningful narrative. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey today. We truly appreciate you spending your time with us. Until next time, take care.